There are 5 types of stories that leaders need to tell in their communication repertoire. Um, Stories are one of the most fundamental ways to transmit ideas. As leaders, it is one of our most fundamental responsibilities to transmit ideas to those who follow us. The objective could be different, but the medium remains the same. The best medium remains the same, which is to tell stories. So, if we want to really get better as leaders and become leaders worth following, which is what I'm trying to inspire people to aspire for, we need to get really good at telling stories. Now, the kind of stories that we tell will vary depending upon our objective with the stories. However, there are 5 kinds of stories that, in my experience, we need to be able to tell in order to become leaders worth following. The first kind of stories are the stories to inspire people, right? So, one of the primary responsibility of a leader is to paint a vision of where we are going towards. Some leaders use numbers and data to share their vision. While one can be compelling and memorable with numbers and data, most of us don't have the emotional connect with data. So while people who can connect with data and understand data and use data as their primary mechanism for communication can follow along, but for the rest of us, using data probably is not as inspiring as when using stories. So for us to remember and to be moved or inspired enough to follow a leader, to be willing to not only follow them but do so believing that the path illuminated by the leader is the right path for us, our emotional state needs to be shifted and charged. This can only happen when we are able to build an emotional connection with them, and stories are capable of doing that. The stories to inspire are usually comprised of the following elements, right? So, our current state of affairs, where we are, the status quo, why that is not acceptable. What other alternatives do we have, which is our vision? Why we need to go achieve this vision, and why not taking an action to change the status quo is not acceptable. One of the best kind of this speech is Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. If you have not listened to that speech, stop this video, go to YouTube, search for I Have a Dream speech and listen to it. You will be moved and inspired. The second kind of stories that leaders need to tell are stories to connect. Stories to connect with the followers and at the same time build trust for us. These stories are personal and reveal our character. These stories help our audience or the team members to form a mental model of what kind of a person we are and what can they expect from us. These stories are best told at the beginning of an important relationship or at the beginning of an important project. They set a bar of expectations that our team can have from us. We need to be careful about these expectations, as we need to be able to at least live up to them and in the best case exceed them by far. Typically, these stories are all about a situation that we found ourselves in and how we responded to that situation to come out better than when we encountered the situation. The typical structure is as follows. Once I was situation, and then this happened, I felt this is what I did because I believe in this, and this is what I learned from the incident. The best examples of these speeches are acceptance speeches. Acceptance of a new position, acceptance of new responsibility. The third kind of stories that leaders need to tell are stories to align people. One of the primary responsibilities of leaders is to get people to align to a specific idea or to a specific ideology or to a specific way of thinking and behaving. We do that by setting expectations and getting everyone to agree and align to these expectations. This is how we curate the culture of our teams. These are pretty simple stories which primarily follow the structure. People like us do things like this. These stories are usually over the top, just to make a point. These stories have someone like our audience as the hero and would be about how this hero acts, how we want our teams to act, in varying situations that our audience might find themselves in. The best examples I can think of such stories is the legends passed on about how an employee at a retailer obsessed with customer delight once refunded the purchase of a tire to a customer when the retailer never carried tires in their store ever. Over the top, with a clear message that we can go to extreme lengths to delight our customers. These stories are the stories of legends. The fourth kind of stories that leaders need to learn how to tell are stories to teach. There are teachable moments almost every day in our encounter, in our daily interactions with our team. Now, teaching them through the medium of a powerful story can help the teaching become etched in their memory forever. The best way to teach someone is to make the teaching emotionally relevant for the students. And stories can actually do that because stories are a medium to transmit emotions. You could tell the story of how you learned something that you're trying to teach. Alternately, you could also ask the students to tell you the story of what they are learning, why they are learning it, and how will they benefit from this. The best examples of these stories come out when we are in a mentoring session. Someone is facing a specific challenge and needs help from us. And as a mentor, we have two kinds of choices. Either we give them the answer or we tell them a story from our life about a time when we faced a similar challenge and how we dealt with it. And then you allow them to make the inference from the story about what is relevant for them and how it can actually help in their current situation. The last kind of story that leaders need to be able to tell well are stories to energize people, to spur them to action. These are the stories that we need to tell so that our team members are willing to take action and stretch themselves to their limits, to wake them up from their slumbers and act with urgency. These stories are usually about why there is a need for urgency and speed and agility. They focus on how each one of us will be affected negatively if we do not move and do so quickly. These types of stories could be about a time when we needed to have acted quickly and decisively but did not, and what that resulted in. Best examples of these kinds of stories are what leaders call the stories of burning platforms. The leaders of once a dominant force want to mobilize their people with a clear call out of the demise of the organization or the team if something is not done and done quickly. In this case, we need to be extremely clear on what we want them to do and how fast we want them to do. All political upheavals or social revolutions start with a story like this, including the one with Rosa Parks on the bus or the Dandi March led by Mahatma Gandhi. In conclusion, I would like to just say this. When I talk about this with leaders, the first question that they ask is where can they find all these kinds of stories? And they can't just have one story to tell all the time, right? So we need to have a continuous source from where we are able to get these stories from. And my response to them is there are stories all around us. We are living in multiple stories. Ours, theirs, everyone who comes in contact with us is living in a story. All we need to do is just be conscious about wanting to see these stories for what they are, collect them, and be able to tell them in an engaging manner. So there are multiple other sources of stories. Newspapers have a lot of stories. Books where authors talk about multiple stories to make a point. Other people's stories that people tell, our leaders, from people from our past and all of that. You can take stories from our history books or even our mythology. Stories are all around us. All we need is the eye to notice one and capture it somewhere so that we can pull one out as and when we need one. Of course, there are nuances in how we tell the story, but that's for another day. Until then, let's find, collect, and build a treasure trove of stories that we can tell when needed by using our natural ability as humans to tell stories. Take care.